Right, I wanted to talk a little bit about greenhouses today. So a greenhouse is a real asset in the garden, and if you only ever go for one gadget, or if you're looking for a Christmas present or a birthday present, make sure it's a greenhouse, because they're really worthwhile. You can do so much more. They extend the season, so in the spring you can start your sowing earlier. In the autumn you can keep things going on for longer, and of course you can overwinter stuff as well. So if you've got tender plants, they'll overwinter in a greenhouse, very often in a cold greenhouse without any heat, depending on what they are. But if we're talking about fruit and veg, very often don't need any heat. Typical greenhouse here. So just a few things to look for. You've got the choice between wood and aluminium. This one's obviously an aluminium greenhouse. Lasts longer, no maintenance at all. Some would say not quite as pretty as a wooden greenhouse. Wood, if you can afford it, is lovely. You know, it's a garden feature as well as something useful to have. But aluminium's very popular. You want to look for good, it sounds obvious, but a good sliding door, or a good door which has got preferably a low seal to it, because you've got to bear in mind you're coming in and out of this perhaps 100 times a day, and you don't want to be tripping over all the time. So a nice low seal, nice big panes of glass. Don't want too much framework, so you want more glass than framework to let the light in. Always remember that anything that stops the light, so if you've got dirt on the glass, and this needs a good clean, but if you've got dirt on the glass, or if you've got a lot of framework, for every 1% of framework, you lose a percent in light as well, so the equivalent amount of light. So make sure that, so nice big panes. You can also buy what they call Dutch light greenhouses, which have got slightly angled sides which catch the sun just that little bit more, so they're worth looking out for. Where to put your greenhouse needs to be somewhere where there might be, if you want to heat it especially, there's an electricity supply, so close to the house is often good. A water supply, obviously very useful, especially in the summer, because you're going to be watering often if you get a nice hot summer such as we've just had. Orientation of the greenhouse doesn't matter too much if it's a small one like this, but if you want to make the most of summer light, then face it north-south. Talking about the top of the greenhouse should be facing north-south. If you want to make the most of winter light, then it's east-west, so if you're growing things in the winter. Otherwise really don't worry about it too much. As I say, close to the house. The only other things to think of, ventilation. This one's got some vents in the side which are very useful, some louver vents. Now they're better than in the side than the sort of ordinary vents which you hinge outwards, because they tend to get in the way. If you're up and down the side of the greenhouse with a wheelbarrow all the time, you don't want the risk of hitting yourself on vents. So louvers are very good, at least in one side, but preferably in both sides. And also make sure you get roof vents. Very often a cheaper greenhouse won't come with very many vents at all, and you might have to pay extra, but it's worth it. So make sure you get at least one roof vent, but preferably two in a small greenhouse like this, a little 6x8 greenhouse. Obviously the bigger the greenhouse, the more vents you want. Finally, a good base as well. It needs, some of them come with a concrete base, some of them you have to make your own, but obviously the site needs to be perfectly level, and it does need a good base to bolt the greenhouse down onto, to keep it secure and to stop it moving. You can imagine you've got glass, so it doesn't need to move at all, otherwise it's all going to crack. And another optional extra, well, you may be lucky enough to buy one that sort of gets this included, and make sure you get some guttering as well. Can't see it here, but on the back of the greenhouse we've got a water butt, and it's amazing how much water you can collect off even a small greenhouse like this. So even if you have to pay for it, go for some guttering as an optional extra. But you really won't regret it. If you buy a greenhouse, it extends your gardening year by at least 2 months, possibly 3, and it means, you know, we've got summer crops in here at the moment, peppers, tomatoes, all those sorts of tender crops do so much better in a greenhouse. And as I say, in the winter, if you've got tender things, I overwinter things like ginger plants and various other perennials. I put some of my patio fruit trees go in there to protect them over the winter. You get use out of it then as well, so it's all year round. So if you're thinking of a present for yourself, buy a greenhouse.